For this year, I knew I wanted to make a lot more music. I started the year with one beat, Drake Type Beat 1. I was in the shower listening to Drake's Scorpion and Nonstop came on. I really liked the drums on that beat and I decided I would copy that pattern for my next track. If you're not familiar, drum patterns can't be copyrighted, so doing something like this is 100% fine. I have a collection of tracks I use as references, so I already own Nonstop. I found the BPM online, dragged the file into Ableton, and lined it up. I first tried dragging the audio into a MIDI clip and selecting drums. This makes Ableton convert the audio into MIDI, specifically trying to find the drums, but this doesn't usually work. So then I made a loop of where the drums loop in the song and I listened. First I tried to copy the drum sounds, not trying to be super exact, but trying to be within that same genre. Then with some trial and error, I recreated the drum pattern. Recreating that first drum loop was pretty easy, and then from there I made my own song. I chopped up a sample, wrote an 808 part, and did some arranging. It was pretty quick from there. I was really happy with the result, and I even told my friend it was already the hardest beat of 2025. So having that success, I decided to keep going. Next I took drums from Mob Ties by Drake. It didn't take me long to decide I wanted to do a full album of Drake type beats. I decided to go through his discography, find drums, and make a total of 12 beats. A couple years ago I went through his discography and made a playlist of the songs I liked, and so that's mainly where I went to get these drums. I ended up taking songs from 6 different albums: Scorpion, Take Care, If You're Reading This It's Too Late, Views, More Life, and Certified Lover Boy. I wasn't trying to take something from every album, I was more just listening to a lot of his music, letting something grab me, and then going from there. I made a lot of trap because that's my favorite kind of Drake, but I also made sure to sample Afrobeat and dancehall rhythms as well. I kept thinking of it as an album, I didn't want the songs to all be the same. The process for the album worked the same as that first song. I would find the song's BPM online, sync it up in my DAW, make a loop, and try to recreate the drum pattern. Some songs were harder to recreate than others, usually the kick and the snare were very prominent, but once in a while there was some very subtle percussion that I almost missed. Noticing those elements and getting it closer and closer to exactly right was always extremely satisfying. I took drums for every beat I made, but occasionally I would steal other elements as well. Not chords or melodies, but structures and timbres. Like when I was working with 9 by Drake, it has a very synth-driven sound, and so on my beat I made sure to include a lot of synths, not stealing melodies or anything, but just trying to have that same instrumental texture that song has. Other times I'd notice how the beat was arranged in terms of bars. Sometimes I would copy that, and other times I wouldn't, but it was always interesting to notice. So after making all those Drake type beats, here's 4 things I learned. The first thing I noticed is how often his songs are 100% on the grid. And maybe that's pretty obvious, but there's so much talk about humanizing drums, it was really cool just to realize I don't need to do that. If I want, I can just draw hi-hats in, not touch them at all, and those are my hi-hats. And it all depends on the genre and what you're going for, of course, but it was nice for me to be reminded that on the grid is valid. Number 2, drums can be simple and repeat a lot. I'm definitely guilty of doing too much with my drums, adding little percussive things, adding fills, but very often in hip-hop, you can just take a pattern that's good and let it ride out. Variation and keeping it interesting is definitely a big part of making a good beat, but I'm noticing how often I overdo it. What I think is maybe boring is still part of the foundation of what the rapper can perform over and write over. And it doesn't need to change maybe as often as I think it needs to change. Especially when you're working with instrumental tracks, just keeping in mind that eventually there's going to be a vocal over it, and so you don't need to keep all the interest in the instrumental. It's more like you're laying a foundation. Number 3, BPM Matters. I wasn't trying to copy BPMs at the start, I would just take the BPM of the original track to make it easier to find the drums. But a big part of making drums dancey or in the pocket is the BPM. And again, maybe this is obvious to a lot of people, but I don't think I think about BPM enough. Usually I just set it, and whatever my BPM is at the start, that's what my song is. But now I see it as something else I can mess with if my rhythm section isn't working. The fourth thing I learned is that stealing like an artist helps. Taking elements from other songs as a jumping off point is a cheat code for inspiration. Even on days when I didn't feel like working on music, once I made myself get a drum pattern from one of these songs, I was pretty quickly inspired to write something and finish it. My plan is to do another artist in February and see what else I can learn. Thank you for making it to the end, and I'll see you next time. Peace.